A few years ago, I was collaborating with a swine integrator in Quebec, and they were experiencing almost 0.3% animal losses, including non-ambulatory and dead animals. And so they started, over a 3 years' time, they started thinking what was the reason for all this. So they started to be more proactive, and started applying taking several actions. Like, for instance, they started modifying the design or the loading docks at the farm. They started training the personnel, the handling crew, and also the drivers. And they started to give they remove some handling tools which are considered quite adversive, like electrical prods, electrical goads, and also they started giving incentives to the drivers for the number of animals arriving dead at the slaughter plant. So the lower was the number, the more money they could get. Or they receive kind of premium for their effort. And over 3 years' time, the rate dropped from 0.28% to 0.04%, just because there was action being taken,
Welcome to Swine at Canada. My name is John Patience, and I'll be the host of today's podcast. With me today, I have Dr. Luigi Faucitano, who's a research scientist with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in Sherbrooke, Quebec. Very interesting guy with a lot of experience in meat quality, especially as it's related to transportation. And that, in fact, is what we're going to talk about today. So welcome, Luigi. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Before we go any further, just for the benefit of our listeners, could you give us a bit of a brief background of yourself, where you're from, your training, and your experiences, Luigi? I think that would be of interest.
Okay. So as my name shows, I'm Italian born. I was born in Bologna, which is in the northern part of Italy, between Milan and Florence. And where I was born, I studied. I did my bachelor study, my doctoral studies there, and in animal science. And then part of my doctoral studies were also done in Spain, where I participated in a survey of pre-slaughter management, pre-slaughter conditions across different slaughter plants there. And then in this period, I got my training in evaluation of animal welfare and the effect on meat quality related to the pre-slaughter handling of pigs, especially pigs from the farm to slaughter. Then after my PhD in University of Bologna, which is, by the way, the oldest university in the world, I moved to Brazil, where I did a part of my postdoctoral studies in the southern Brazil, where I had a grant as a visiting professor. And then I started teaching, and actually I had the first responsibility as a leader of a project, the first ever project on pre-slaughter handling in Brazil. I always been appreciated for that and acknowledged for this in that country. And after that, I went back to Europe. I spent the rest of my postdoc activities in Spain, where I worked on stunning and slaughter of pigs, different techniques, and always related to the welfare of animals and the effect on meat quality. And then after a few years, I stayed in Spain, and I worked for the genetic company, a swine genetic company called the Pig Improvement Company, where I was the technical manager of the company, evaluating carcass and meat quality of genetic nucleus of the company. And after a year, I had the chance to the great opportunity to be hired by Agriculture and Food Canada here in Sherbrooke, in Quebec, and and I've been holding this position since then. As a meat scientist, leading a unique, at least to me, research program on the effect of pre-slaughter management, including transportation, on the welfare of pigs and meat quality.
Swine Veterinary Partners offers a full range of animal health and production services to Canadian pork producers. We approach health management through personalized solution with concern for profitability while taking into account performance and the well-being of your animals.
Very good. So just to finish that up, how long would you say you've been working in this area of transportation and meat quality?
Well, I started already a bit during my doctoral studies, because of course transportation was included, because there was a survey of different pre-slaughter procedures, including transportation, of course. But specifically on transportation, I started in 2007 in collaboration with the Prairie Swan Center in Canada, with the University of Saskatchewan as well, where Ergonio was also interested in doing some research on transportation, and that time was key, because at that time was actually when the industry started being aware of issues on transportation, due to the fact that there was a peak in mortality rates in animal losses during transportation, and so the big question was, what was the cause of it? So we started from scratch, because no other research on transportation was ever done in Canada, apart from a little survey in the late 70s. But apart of that, there was really nothing that was done. It was done something in the United States, but very almost nothing in Canada. So we started from scratch, and we wanted to see whether some factors we thought were important, like vehicle design, the transportation conditions, were the causing factors of this greater animal losses rate. So we started evaluating different vehicle models, and started to get into these models to see what was the cause of the effect of the vehicle model or on the welfare of the animals, and the losses, and eventually variation in carcass and meat quality. And so in 2007 we started.
Yeah, so about 15 years. Yeah, you're well experienced.
And we started with a big surveys on different vehicle models, testing vehicle models, looking at the ambient condition inside, and how the animals were coping with this in terms of behavior and physiological response, and eventually how the meat quality could be affected by all this type of responses. So I would say 2006, 2009, where actually the highest mortality rate was achieved.
So let's start when we're talking about transportation, Luigi. Let's start with the what are some of the adverse things that can happen during transportation and what their impact is. And let's start first with mortality. What would be the range in mortality during transport? And what do you think is the lowest practical target for mortality during transportation?
Well, there's no actually a target. The thing is that, of course, the logically we say that the least the least as possible, the lowest number of animals being lost during transportation as possible. In Canada, we have a mortality rate that ranges between 0.07 to 0.08% as of now. So meaning that 7 to 8 animals every 10,000 being transported are dead on arrival at the slaughter plant. But of course, there are higher rates in the United States. There are even higher rates in South America. Usually, we cannot say I really like to have a much lower rate. Of course, this is logical, but we cannot put a number. Because the complete picture of the situation of the condition of the load in a truck is not only reflected in the number of animals which are dead on arrival, also animals that arrive fatigued or arrive injured. So usually when we have, I don't know, usually the ratio we say when we have a dead animals in the truck on arrival at the slaughter plant, we have a risk of having 2 or 3 times more animals which are non-ambulatory, for instance, because they are fatigued or because they are injured. So we have to actually evaluate the complete picture of the situation.
Yeah, I guess what I was trying to get at, Luigi, was if I'm a pork producer listening to this podcast and I'm measuring, I'm keeping track of mortality during transport, and I'm sure most producers are. What is a number that I could look at and say, I think I'm okay. I should be looking at other aspects of my operation because I'm more likely to be able to achieve improvement. Or, gee, I listened to this podcast last week, and they were talking about mortality rates that are much lower than what I'm talking about. So that's where I'm trying to come from. I know there's no definitive, but you're saying that typically in Canada, 0.07 to 0.08%.
Yeah, exactly. This I think is a good figure. I mean, if we are lower than 0.10%, this is a good figure. But for instance, in countries where mortality rate is very low, like for instance in Denmark, we have 0.02%. 0.01%. I was collaborating with because I also, most of my research activity is in partnership with the industry, and actually 50% of my funding source come from the industry, and I work very closely with the industry here in Canada. And a few years ago, I was collaborating with a swine integrator in Quebec, and they were experiencing almost 0.3% animal losses, including non-ambulatory and dead animals. And so they started, over a 3 years' time, they started thinking what was the reason for all this. So they started to be more proactive, and started applying taking several actions. Like for instance, they started modifying the design or the loading docks at the farm. They started training the personnel, the handling crew, and also the drivers. And they started to give they remove some handling tools which are considered quite aversive, like electrical prods, electrical goads, and also they started giving incentives to the drivers for the number of animals arriving dead at the slaughter plant. So the lower was the number, the more money they could get. Or they receive kind of premium for their effort. And over 3 years' time, the rate dropped from 0.28% to 0.04%, just because there was action being taken, So that actually the company was very happy, because the animal loss rate was decreased significantly.
Absolutely. Excellent. We might come back to that if we have time to talk about some of those changes more specifically. But I would like to first talk a little bit about your research, because I think our listeners would be interested. What are some of the key studies or perhaps key findings in your research in this whole area of transportation and its impact on mortality, non-ambulatory pigs, and on meat quality?
Yeah, as I said before, when I started, we started from scratch. So we wanted to know what was the situation there in terms of the vehicle fleet being used in Canada for swine transportation to slaughter. I never studied on the transportation of other pig types like piglets or cull animals. So market weight pigs are usually transported from farm to slaughter, and with vehicles that were, and at the time, but still there are some vehicle models that are still being used. The vehicle which was considered very critical was a potbelly trailer, which is a 3-decked vehicle, passively ventilated with no ventilation fans at all. And it was criticized because it was kind of being spotted, because it was considered in the within the industry like the major cause for the animal losses during transportation. And so we wanted to know whether actually to confirm this opinion, this assumption. And actually we found that this trailer is quite difficult to load and unload, because the 3 decks are fed through ramps. So when the animals had to go to the upper ramp, to the upper deck, or to the bottom deck, they have to negotiate ramps. And ramps most of the time are very steep. Usually when the ramp angle or the ramp slope is above 20 degrees, usually pigs have more difficulties in going up and down, especially going down, and they are very stressed. And the models we tested feature this type of ramps, especially the models that, because this type of trailer is a kind of double purpose. Some models are used for cattle and pig transportation, and other models are just for pig transportation. Usually those that are used for cattle transportation have up to 3 ramps going up and down, and from another ramp going from the upper deck to the nose of the trailer. And this ramp are very steep. Sometimes they are 25, 30 degrees. So you can imagine it's more a toboggan than a slide than a ramp. So they actually pigs actually slide down from these ramps. So it's difficult for them to cope with this, and also it's difficult for the handlers to drive these pigs, to the compartment that they are destined to. And so we realized that this, we confirmed with the first trial that this trailer was very critical. And so we started to modify the design by, reducing the slope of these ramps. And also some companies I collaborated with, they also try to put some hydraulic features inside, like hydraulic ramps, or they put some ventilation fans, because another problem with this type of trailer is a passive ventilation, meaning that the airflow just goes in, the air flows in when the vehicle is moving. So when the vehicle is stationary, sitting somewhere, there's no airflow at all. And especially when the vehicle is stationary under work condition, the temperature can go up to 10 degrees more than outside temperature. And considering that the thermal neutral zone of pigs, matter weight pigs, as a threshold, if we exceed this threshold, pigs can suffer from heat stress and can die, or can become non-ambulatory. So we work on this, on the design of this trailer, and we also try to assess alternative to this trailer, other trailers that can be used. Trailers with removing completely the ramps, using trailers with hydraulic features like hydraulic decks, and in all kind of transport condition, in summer and winter, long transportation, short transportation. And there was a company, for instance, I collaborated with, is Allemand Breton here in Quebec, in the northern Quebec. Viande du Breton is again another swine integrated company, and as they are integrated, they own everything. They own the farms, they own the trucks, and they own the slaughter plants. So they control everything. And they actually, like the other company I told you about, they are very interested in improving their condition, because at the end of the day, it's the quality of the product which is affected. So they found that actually we compare a different situation that this company has. They have farms which are quite far away, 7 hours away from the plant, and farms that are very close, like up to probably 45 minutes from the plant. So they wanted to know whether they could keep this potbelly trailer for the condition they have, their micro condition they have. And our study showed that when the transport conditions are okay, the animals have a good space to lie down, they are in comfort, they can cope with the potbelly trailer regardless of the ramp, despite the presence of the ramp, for a long distance transportation, because they have the time to settle down and to lie down and to recover from the stress of handling and loading. When this trailer is used for short transportation time, like 45 minutes, this trailer is not recommended because pigs are still under the effect of the stressful loading because of the ramps. And when they arrive at the plant, they are still fatigued. They didn't recover at all. So usually the presorter period, the presorter handling is quite tricky because it consists of many additive effects: handling, transportation, preparation of the animals, interaction with humans, different environments. So we have to control as much as possible. Of course, many factors are completely out of control. But when we add a stressful loading, stressful handling through ramps, and then unloading again, and then interaction with human to drive these pigs to the rest pen at the slaughter plant, all these factors add up in terms of stress. And so this, at the end of the day, just an example how my research actually was helpful. It was useful for the industry. My research was actually key for the company to make a decision. They decided to keep the mobile trailer for the transportation from the faraway farms, and to have another vehicle models for the farms that were nearer, were closer to the slaughter plant. And the other model, which actually was compared to the potbelly trailer, was a flat deck trailer, which is the same load capacity of a potbelly trailer, 210, 220 pigs per load, but featuring hydraulic decks. So there were no ramps. The middle and the top deck was completely were semi-hydraulic. And so this is the first trailer with hydraulic feature that was introduced in Canada. Nowadays, there are other vehicles coming from Europe that are completely hydraulic. The decks are completely hydraulic. And actually, they are much easier to load and unload. They are completely actively ventilated vehicles, so you can control the microclimate. This is another part of research I did on the control of a microclimate inside the trailer.
Do you have any sense of the trucks that are being used to haul hogs in Canada? What proportion of them would be the design that you're recommending?
Well, nowadays the potbelly trailer I told you about is still the most popular one, especially in the West. Also, for instance, in terms of pig types, for instance, this is a kind of an example of very vulnerable pig type, which are the cow sows, which are transported from Canada to the United States. 80% of cow sows are shipped to the United States because there are only 2 or 3 specialized slaughter plants for cow sows, and most of them are actually in Iowa, in your state. They go to Illinois, to Iowa, so the network of cow sows can be up to 2,000 kilometers away, and so the cow sows are transported a long time. And usually these sows are transported with potbelly trailers. So in the West, potbelly trailer is still quite popular. But there are companies that are more interested in new technology, in more sophisticated vehicles, and they are more aware of the losses they can suffer from. And like, for instance, Conestoga Meat in Ontario, or Olimel also, they have other trailers now, which are, the Dutch technology or Italian technology. The last vehicle models I tested are vehicles coming from the Netherlands. They are the most sophisticated ones I ever tested. They don't have hydraulic decks. The decks are fixed, but they have an hydraulic tailgate lift. So they have a platform in the back, in the rear part of the trailer. So it's like an elevator in the end. So groups of animals are loaded and then lifted up to the decks, and without negotiating any ramp. And what is interesting in this type of trailer is the ceiling can be lifted up hydraulically. so they can give more room to the driver and the handlers to get in without crawling into the compartment like in the other type of trailers. Because in this type of trailers, especially in the passive ventilated vehicles, the headroom between the animal and the ceiling of the upper deck is very short. So that affects the airflow and also the handling, fatigue and of the drivers that having to handle the animals inside. So these trailers have this feature which is really innovative, like lifting up the ceiling, so the driver can do the handling work standing without any other physical effort. So it's very useful and is very lower shorter time consuming, and less fatigue. And so this is type of trailers. The advances the way that the tracking technology, the tracking company are making, is especially in terms of ventilation, active ventilation, and design of trailers in order to making the airflow smoother, so that across the vehicles, and in order to control the heat loss of the animals and making them more in comfort.
I'm unfortunately, one of my responsibilities as host is to keep an eye on the clock, Luigi.
Yeah. And I told you that I talk too much.
Oh no, not at all. This is very interesting. And but before we move on, I just very briefly, you've talked about the impact of transportation on mortality and non-ambulatory pigs, which is great. Now let's move to what are the potential impacts of transportation on meat quality?
Yeah. Well, by principle and based on research, when you make an overview of all the studies over the years, the conclusion is that transportation is more an animal welfare issue than a meat quality issue. This is because between the transportation and the slaughter moment, we have a buffer, which is the rest time or the lairage time at the slaughter plant, which actually its purpose is exactly to let the pigs recover from the stress of transportation and handling for meat quality control, more than animal welfare control. Because if it was just animal welfare, the animals are just to be unloaded and driven to the slaughter point, to the kill floor right away. There's no, for their welfare is much better this way. In order, instead of adding another stress, which is in a new environment with other pigs completely unfamiliar, so they they fight and stuff. But for meat quality control, rest time is the key, is the period that is necessary. So because of that, when the animals is rested, is recovered completely from the stress of transportation, so that we don't see anything on meat quality. I still keep on evaluating meat quality in my studies, because you never know if something happened. But what is really important to say is that regardless of the buffer effect of lairage of resting pigs in the slaughter plant before slaughter, if transportation stress is very severe, is very strong, then you can still see effects on meat quality. So this buffer is not efficient enough to let the pigs recover, because the stress was very high. So usually when, for instance, I usually show a table in my presentation when I see when the transportation stress based on behavior response or physiological response is very significant, then you can see effects on meat quality. In terms of exudation, or in terms of exudative pork, or in terms of dark pork, depending on if the stress is chronic or is acute. But just in that case, when transportation is very severe, the transportation stress is very severe, then you can end up seeing something in the meat.
And typically, what is the length of lairage that is recommended?
Well, usually I usually say when the transportation is okay and the pigs have the time, the chance to recover well, so they have a good space to lie down in the pen on the lairage, and the environment is under control in terms of temperature, humidity, and noise and stuff. In an hour and a half, the animals recover. Usually said, research from the late 90s, they said that with a large of 2-3 hours, the animal recover completely, return to the basal level of several stress indicators in blood. But in my experience, with 1 hour and a half, 2 hours, the animal recover quite well.
Very good. Very good. Well, thanks very much. This has been really interesting. I think we probably tried to cover too much territory in the amount of time we had available, because it's a fascinating topic, but it's also one that has many components. So maybe we'll get you back sometime and drill into some of the very specific things that you recommended, for example, with the company you worked with, where you were able to reduce their mortality and ambulatory issues from about 0.28%, I think you said, down to 0.02 or 0.03. I think that would be of interest, but we'll have to save that for another time.
It's time for our famous three.
Just very quickly then, I have three questions for you that you are aware of. And the first one is, what would be your favorite swine-related book?
Well, I tend to be a kind of show-off, because I published a book last year, and which is called Pre-slaughter handling and slaughter of meat animals, and which is a kind of my legacy, to the new generation of my research. I was just an editor. I had a couple of chapters in the book, but I also had the privilege to work with other colleagues who actually contributed to the book, and is covering several species, even exotic species. But this is the book I'm proud of. Yes. But the thing that the books from Temple Grandin are the books they were my textbooks when I was student, and when 4 or 5 years ago, I was invited to contribute with a chapter to the fifth edition of her book, Handling and Transport, Livestock Transport and Handling. I was invited by her to contribute to this book. I was really an emotional time, an emotional moment, because I studied in their book, and it was my textbook during my PhD studies, and then I had the chance to contribute to it. So I think the Temple Grandin books are usually the kind of must-have books. But I recommend to just to promote myself a bit, my book published last year.
Yes. Moving on then to a broader question, and that is, what is your favorite book that you would recommend to our listeners that's not related to swine, but just general reading, whether it's fiction or nonfiction?
Yeah, well, I'm a scientist, but I am an intellectual person. So I really love history, and history of art especially. So I have a passion for this. When I read books, I tend to buy this type of books, because I'm a scientist, I'm a researcher, but I'm also a scholar. So I like learning all the time. So sometimes I read some quite more narrative books, or with stories and stuff. But I tend to buy this type of books.
And then our final question is, I think it's a particularly helpful question for our younger listeners who are just perhaps starting their career or maybe still in school. And that is that, in your opinion, what sets successful professionals in the swine area apart from the crowd? What makes people particularly successful?
Well, the success is usually based on your visionary skills, on your attitude to be innovative as much as possible, to read a lot and try to look for gaps in knowledge. That can actually attract the interest from the public, from the industry, from your colleagues. This is the three keys that are the three type of temper or personality features that are very important to be successful in our field. Be innovative, being visionary, and being always aware of gaps that can that can be available, or can be seen in knowledge, and try to jump into it.
Great. Thank you very much for that. We've been talking to Luigi Faucitano, who's a research scientist with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in Sherbrooke, Quebec. We've been talking about hog transportation and some of the things that can go wrong in transportation, and some of the research that he has done over the years to enhance the design of transportation vehicles. So thank you very much, Luigi. It's been a real pleasure and a very fascinating podcast.
You're very welcome. It's been my pleasure too.